Hello, this is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And this is James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com, and we both welcome you to this latest episode of The New World next week. And it's a star-studded weekend at the Colosseum filled with terror drills, black ops, and everyone's favorite spectacle known as the Stupor Bowl. So all jokes aside, we actually do have a lot of serious information to go over. And so we want to hit first on MediaMonarchy.com, domestic terror drills and the rehearsal of Misfortune. There is a large amount of terror drills and military war games going on right now. And we'll just preface this by saying, James, that we pay attention to the drills because during 9/11 and 7/7 and other events, drills have a way of turning live. So without going into that full situation, what we want to tell you about by way of the Washington Post, D.C. Metro Transit Police stage large anti-terrorism drill, M4 rifles, bomb-sniffing dogs, essentially black ski mask stormtroopers in D.C.'s Metro. This was on Tuesday, February 2nd. Interestingly enough, it also had a delegation of senior Indian police officials observing Tuesday's drills. They're very interested in the technology the U.S. uses. If we move over to Ohio, by way of CantonRep.com, NORAD sends F-16s over Ohio in domestic hostile acts exercises. Interesting note here, the other aircraft being flown in this drill are by pilots under contract who will pose as enemy combatants, essentially playing the red team in the war game terror drill scenario. Thirdly, we'll jump to the CBC as we gear up for, James, the Terror Olympics. Domestic threats, biggest Olympic security concern. A University of Calgary expert in modern terrorism says small disruptions by domestic groups are the most likely security threat to the upcoming 2010 Winter Games in Vancouver. We also have terror drills going on in, I believe, Minneapolis. We also have Amalgam Virgo, FAA and NORAD to control airspace around Super Bowl 44. We'll first again preface this by mentioning that Amalgam Virgo is the same name of one of the numerous terror drills that were running on the morning of 9/11 of hijacked jets, commercial jets being crashed into government buildings, putting the lie to Condoleezza and Bush saying we had no idea they would do this. Amalgam Virgo 10 is based in Miami. They're working on what's called temporary flight restrictions. This whole article, again, is available on MediaMonarchy.com. The art that I have along with this is from a 1977 film called Black Sunday, wherein a radicalized homegrown veteran teams up with a Palestinian group to hit the Super Bowl taking place in Miami. So does any of that sound familiar, James?
It sort of does, and why don't you tell people who directed that flick?
John Frankenheimer, who's of course the director of The Manchurian Candidate. We don't have time to get into here John Frankenheimer's connections to the death of Robert F. Kennedy. But James, what do you have to say about the massive amount of domestic terror drills being run?
Well, as you said before, it is something that we need to keep our eye on, and the suggestion certainly isn't that every time there's a drill that's going to be flipped live and become something real, but the suggestion is that that does always happen when there is a false flag event, like 9/11, like 7/7. And as you pointed out, Amalgam Virgo was one of the drills that was influencing and foreshadowing the events of 9/11, but I believe that actually took place a few months before 9/11. That was one of the drills that took place in the run-up to 9/11. But if people search for that, they'll find plenty of information on how Amalgam Virgo eerily foreshadowed the events of 9/11. But yes, this is something that we need to keep our eye on. And on that note, people can tune into episode 116 of the Corbett Report that will be released this Sunday. That's going to be about the Vancouver Olympics and the possibility of false flag terrorism. So something that we've got our eye on here at the Corbett Report as well. And I would suggest people check out your interview with Peter Levinda from last year if they're interested in finding out more about Frankenheimer and Kennedy and all of that.
The sinister forces.
Yes, very interesting information there. All right, well, that's an extremely important thing to be keeping our eye on because of story number 2. And what is story number 2, James?
Story number 2, our initial report comes by way of Paul Joseph Watson and Kurt Nimmo. Intel chiefs certain Al-CIAda will stage terror soon. Using information gleaned from the blatantly set up underwear bomber Patsy Muttalab, intelligence chiefs have assured us that their bosses, those being the Western finance oligarchs and the rogue networks, they've assured us essentially that their bosses will stage another terror attack in the U.S. within the next 3 to 6 months. We have sources from ABC News as well as CNN and Washington Post and all around the world. This was quite the scare fest that we had. Likely terror attack, all the intelligence chiefs. There is a ton of information that goes along with this, and as they're ratcheting up the fear, we meanwhile see that the official story of the Christmas Day bomber in Flight 253 is falling apart. They won't announce that on the front of the news and with flashy graphics on the mainstream media. It'll be buried at the bottom of an article on page A47. But that basically Muttalab was shielded by intelligence agencies, and the FBI has finally admitted what Kurt Haskell, one of the eyewitnesses on Flight 253, said all along, is that Muttalab had a well-dressed handler. This all ties in, again, with ratcheting up the Threataganda. We're calling this Threataganda Rising here on the posting on MediaMonarchy.com. All the other updates that tie in with Flight 253, as well as a lot of the think tanks and the white papers coming out. Recent white papers, and we can read about this, I believe, thanks to allgov.com and Politics Daily, the new Quadrennial Defense Review report that essentially, when they look ahead, they see war without end. If we thought, James, we were going to get some kind of change, you know, we see that, of course, the two wings of the phony bird fly in the same direction.
Right, and the bird is propelled by terrorism and phony threats, and definitely I think one of the things that we are doing here, both you and I collaboratively, is to take a look at the open source information that indicates what the general threat level is for false flag terror, and I think it has to do with not only the number of drills that are taking place, but also things like this, the pumping up and ratcheting up of the fear that we haven't seen at least recently. So there's definitely they're prepping the public for something, and it's I guess extremely important that people at least take a look at that information about Haskell, because of course everything that he was saying about that underwear bombing flight is now checking out, even though it was being denied at the time by the authorities. Everything that he said, they're now admitting to. So that's an extremely important piece of the puzzle, because it does show that there's more to this story than what we were originally being told. So very important for us to keep our eye on that. And we also have one more story that's just very fascinating to me. Why don't you tell people about story number 3?
So, yeah, of course. So speaking of more information, I covered this briefly when the story first broke, and I believe I said on the MediaMonarchy.com podcast that I imagine we'll probably get more into this story as we learn more about it. And lo and behold, we have. And I think, James, this puts it into perspective of what we've been talking about, of the drills and the black ops and the intelligence connections that are replete throughout these waters. You'll recall just over a week or so ago, we had the 4 men charged in a phone scheme at Louisiana Senator Landrieu's office. Of course, out of New Orleans, Louisiana. Saints going to the Stupor Bowl, I might add. Again, all the connections are there. Again, seriously, men arrested in Louisiana Watergate have intelligence links. This easier to read, easier to digest piece comes from the Raw story, but I implore you to check out Gordon Duff's article on veteranstoday.com, where essentially we know now that not only James O'Keefe, but also Robert Flanagan, Joseph Basil, but most importantly, Stan Dye, D-A-I, is connected to Georgetown University's CIA summer school program, and all the links in the PDF documents are there for you. Essentially, these guys are trained by the intelligence operatives to go out there and wiretap and bug our elected officials. We know that the NSA was tapping Jane Harmon. Now we see tapping Landrieu. Was this a black op that went wrong and they got busted? Or like the original Watergate, is it perhaps the event was meant to draw the attention? It was meant to be a bungled false flag event. James?
Yeah, at this stage, again, we don't really know, and it depends how this plays out and to whose benefit. But it is important for people to note that the CIA charter, of course, prohibits the CIA from doing any operations inside the United States, but that has never stopped them before, as we've seen time and time and time again. And of course, even Governor Ventura talking about the CIA giving him a visit after he became governor in Minnesota, or numerous other things. And it's not going to stop them in the future, because there is absolutely no president or Congress or Senate that will ever be able to stop the CIA from doing whatever it wants, because as Ron Paul recently noted, there has been a coup in America and the CIA did take over. So
criminals in action.
That's exactly right. Yes. All right. Excellent. Well, important stories. I hope people check it out. James, MediaMonarchy.com. Thank you once again for all the information.
Thank you. Take care.